This article is called Obstacles to Public Diplomacy, but it's not supposed to be in a negative way. On the other hand, it's supposed to bring some understanding towards the work of public diplomacy and maybe cultural diplomacy as well. Since in my understanding, cultural diplomacy is a part of public diplomacy of a broader interest of a state. The aim of this contribution is to analyze public diplomacy in a little bit non-traditional way. That means from the receiver's point of view. That means not from the state point of view, but from us, actually, from the public, because we are the targeted by states, but not only states, but also in cooperation with non-state actors. There is well, of course, there is a relation, to be clear, between public diplomacy and soft power that I'm driving from, or Melison and I, for example, say that public diplomacy is produced by soft power, and soft power has been mentioned several times during this conference. So just a clear understanding about public diplomacy. It is about the influence of public attitudes and opinions in the formation and execution of foreign policy, but it's just to be clear, there are many understandings of public diplomacy, but the shared understanding is that it's supposed to influence the opinion and attitudes. Nevertheless, we should also take an interdisciplinary view of public diplomacy, not only from international relations, but also from sociology, maybe anthropology, psychology, and politological point of views, and ask how effective can be public diplomacy in changing our opinions and attitudes in winning hearts and minds. I took the knowledge from sociological research. For example, Binopal is talking about a public diplomacy in two ways, that there are two basic understandings, that public diplomacy can be taken rational and on the other hand also as irrational. Rational, that means targeting key actors who are understanding the topic of foreign policy very deeply and processing every kind of information and being persuaded by argument. And on the other hand, the irrational, which is more characterized by massive approach, many people, and also involving some emotions. However, so what the question is, how can, for example, sociology bring some understanding into the change of attitudes and opinions? For example, Visser, Holbrook, and Kroksniks, they wrote a very interesting study or research and found out that, for example, acquisition of knowledge, public diplomacy is also about spreading information, found out that this kind of raising knowledge has also limited consequences in the desired behavior of the individuals. They are suggesting that interventions in people's knowledge does not automatically yield in anticipated consequences. They are using examples from other domains, which I try to apply just as an example. It was these examples were taken from the US. such as, for example, in the 90s, educational campaigns about AIDS in the US, which were spreading the knowledge about this disease. People started to be more and more informed about the consequences of this disease. However, the broader aims were not accomplished, such as, for example, the behavior of preventing, trying to protect themselves. Or the other one is, for example, health campaigns about obesity. People who were being informed in the US about the consequences of eating not correct food, they were informed. However, in the last decades, the obesity was still rising. So this suggests that the dramatic increases in political knowledge has modest effects on the change of opinions, and that's why we can just now at this stage only assume that this applies also to the political opinion, that means also to the field of public diplomacy. These scholars actually found a very interesting factor that there is something more that is needed for people to change their attitudes and opinions, and it's the motivation. So they summarized, when the outcome requires information and not motivation, the political knowledge will change the opinion or the attitude. However, if the motivation is the deciding factor, it will be not the information, but the motivation which will change our attitudes or opinions. Other interesting knowledge from the sociology is from Lane and Sears, who found strong versus weak opinions. And there's a quote from their book: "If a source with some prestige is supposed to change, is attempting to change opinions which are very different and very strongly held, the outcome is likely to be reduce the prestige of the person who is persuading." So this is also a very interesting knowledge which could be applied also in public diplomacy in order to be really careful about trying to change or persuade the others about our opinions. And they were also stressing the importance of formative years. That means the children period in which we are, especially children, are taking the values and opinions uncritically. And our values and are later used as an orientation in order to resolve some kind of unknown issues. And we are most of the times taking the solutions or making the solution according to our values, which were learned in our formative years. And education was also mentioned more times during this session as a very powerful tool in cultural diplomacy, but also public diplomacy as well. Historical analysis, for example, case of West Germany after the end of the World War. In this analysis, I would like to point out that it is possible to change norms. In this analysis, Bergman was analyzing the changing anti-Semite norm to anti-Semite norm in the West Germany, which was in 1945 prevailing, in 60s retreating, and in 80s marginalized. So it was a successful story. However, he's pointing out that the change of political culture, the whole political culture of the whole society, was necessary to change the norm in the publics, in the society. And the synergy of many relevant actors was needed. external influence, that means the allies who at the beginning were controlling media, the ruling elite which was elected and refusing this anti-Semite norm, media which refused to publish any articles which would be scandalizing, and institutions such as cultural institutions and educational institutions. That means that the new generation was taught by new topics and books. However, Bergman is also pointing out that the change in norm did not actually take a place in the older generation, but it was more in the new generation that the anti-Semite norm took place. So the intergenerational change is also very important to be taken into account in also this kind of diplomacy. I will skip this. So the conclusions of these articles are: changing and existing public opinions and attitudes is a very difficult task. However, it's not impossible. Nevertheless, when doing the strategies, we need to take the knowledge also from other disciplinaries, especially sociology and psychology, which are dealing with publics, with us, with the target of the public and cultural diplomacy. The conclusion is that increase in knowledge is insufficient in some cases. In some cases it's sufficient, but in some cases it needed something more. It's motivation. And it requires, in other cases, synergy of crucial actors. So it's not enough just a wish of one government, but sometimes of the sending government, but sometimes it really needs the support of the other state as well, of the government of the receiving society. And the aim, change of values and norms, just from one historical analysis that I read, is suggesting that it is, if it's about this change, it's more likely to take place through intergeneration. Thank you.